sports are really important vehicles for relationships.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
Welcome to Rabbi on the Sidelines. This is Rabbi Erez Sherman from Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. This week we are joined by the founder and chairman of AFI, Athletes for Israel, Daniel Posner. Daniel is a graduate of Yeshiva University, MBA from University of Chicago, Chief Investment Officer of ROTSL Investment Group, but as you just said, since October 7th, really full-time, if you wish, on Athletes for Israel, which was not founded after October 7th, but you said 5 years before. So let's go back to the beginning, and you're a Wall Street guy all your life, and you say, I'm going to find Athletes for Israel. What was the inspiration, and how did it take off?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. This is super exciting. I know our paths have crossed so many times over the last couple of years since we've been bringing professional athletes and collegiate athletes to Israel, and really excited to be here in this beautiful sanctuary in this beautiful synagogue.
It's usually full.
So I started Athletes for Israel because I'd become so frustrated by the negative media attention that Israel has consistently had over the years. And I started to do some research, and I said, when I started my own family office called ROTSL Investment Group, I said, I want to spend some portion of my time, let's say 25% or a third of it, focusing on giving back and doing philanthropy. And this is one of the areas that I've always been confounded by. And so I went to Israel, and I started to investigate, and I met with people from the IDF, I met with people from government, I met with many of the spokespeople, articulating the narrative about Israel. Israelis were actually quite good. They were articulate. They had the same talking points that I had been learned for decades as a Jewish day school graduate. And I came to the conclusion that as Israelis or as Jews, when we talk about Israel, we're not seen as being objective. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're seen as being biased. Mm-hmm. And it's partly true because we are advocates for Israel. But then I said there are other people, in fact, there are millions of people that love Israel and love the Jewish people. And when they talk about Israel, the impact that they can have is so powerful and so impactful. And at the same time, I have kids. I have 6 kids, and I have several teenagers, and my daughters would always come to me and say, hey, Daddy, look what I learned today. I said, oh, well, where'd you learn that from? And they said, well, I learned it on TikTok or Instagram. And then I said, you know what, instead of the old school traditional way of teaching, or we always talk about how important education is and educating people about Israel, the traditional way of doing it is through a PowerPoint slide with bullet points. And I said, we got to go where the kids are, where the millennials are learning their information. And who do they look up to? And often it's influencers and athletes. And I said, we need to start bringing more and more athletes and people that our kids look up to Israel to really understand the truth about Israel.
And what was your sports journey? Was it a varsity career? Was it a collegiate career?
That's a great question. So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I'm kind of an out-of-towner, similar to you, in a small community, Jewish community. And I was I played on the Yeshiva basketball team. I was the 6th man off the bench of a
6th man off the bench.
I was the sixth man on the team with a class of 17 people. And so I'd say my playing career wasn't nearly the same. I think at my bar mitzvah was the first time that I kind of understood that I wasn't going to make the NBA or any of the professional sports teams. But one of my most special and most memorable growing up experiences was just being a spectator sports fan. One of my most precious memories is going to the 1984 Detroit Tigers World Series Game 5, watching us win the championship with my dad and my brothers. Special experience. And I've been a Detroit Lions, struggling and suffering Detroit Lions fan all my life. And now, fortunately, fortunately we're doing really well now. And as a Lions, and I don't know if you're a Rams fan or maybe you're a Bills fan, but
we're non-political here, so we do Chargers and Rams here.
Chargers and Rams,
Bruins and
we gave you guys Matthew Stafford, and we're very happy that you guys were able to win a championship with him, and we got some nice draft picks along the way.
Actually, I have another connection with Detroit. We just had Jason Benetti, the voice of the Tigers.
Oh, nice.
Who's a good friend of mine and now a good friend of the show, and he does amazing, amazing things as well.
Yes, he does.
So you don't play in college, but you have this passion for sports. And actually the same thing. I went to Columbia, and we can talk about that in a different time. But I don't play in college, but I realized that sports can do something that nothing else can, and we as well have different platforms. And so when did you put those two and two together that you said, I can actually reach these athletes, and then they maybe will even say yes to Israel?
Yeah, well, I've always had a passion for sports. I've always loved sports. I've always loved being part, both playing. I'm a big skier, golfer, but I love to play all recreational sports. And my kids love sports, and I love Israel. Over the course of my Wall Street career, my family and I, we go to Israel at least once a year. We go for the holidays. We're there for Sukkot. And I come back and I show all my colleagues at work pictures, and I tell them about our experiences there. And every single person would say to me, Daniel, the next time you go, please take me with you.
Wow.
And at the same time, Israel, we as Jews, and many of us who've been there many, many times, we take it for granted how amazing it is. But when you take people to Israel for the first time, it's kind of like taking a little child to the candy store. Yep. Their mouths just open wide. They're in awe. Israel sells itself so beautifully, and it has so much for so many different kinds of people. So whether you're into technology, whether you're into religion, whether you're into diversity, whatever it is, Israel has it for you. And so one of the things we do is we love to tailor our trips to make the most out of it for each person.
And so what was the first trip, and how did you decide who to take, and what were the outcomes of that trip?
Yeah, so we started with professional. We're probably best known for many of the big college programs that we brought to Israel. We brought Arizona, Auburn, Kansas State. But we started because I said, look, there are people who have over time brought professional sports players to Israel. Omri Kasperi had brought several delegations. Robert Kraft had brought several delegations. And I said, we need to do more of that, first of all. But second of all, coming from a Wall Street, more analytical standpoint, I wanted to really focus on the impact. And the second part is, our focus is not on Jews, in fact. In fact, it's on finding partners for the Jewish nation and for Jewish people. And the way to do that,
love it.
The idea is that there's 15 million Jews in the world. There's 8 billion people. There's just not enough Jews that are going to move the needle or have an impact. We need to find partners in our fight for Israel, and partners who can love Israel. And so I said, who are those partners that we're going to bring? And so I started bringing professional ball players, guys like Eddie Curry and Ray Allen and Enes Kanter. And
it's also a good friend of Sinai Temple on the show. Love him.
Of course. So we brought many football players, basketball players, baseball players, and we said, how are we going to have the most impact? And after having more and more professional players that we focused on and using social media to really amplify our message, I got a call. Ron Dermer and Tamir Goodman put me in touch with Bruce Pearl, Coach Pearl.
Also been right here.
It was a good friend of yours in the telecast. And we started with what was supposed to be a 15-minute meeting.
That doesn't happen with Coach Pearl.
And we wound up talking for 3 hours. And Coach Pearl said to me, we're like brothers from another mother. He joined our board. He's now a very close and dear friend. And he joined our board, and we joined forces. And he is in a profession that requires a full-time, 7-day a week, 365-day a year focus. There's no other coach in the world that I can think of that is so not just passionate about Israel and passionate about but just passionate about any other cause. And he wears his Judaism on his sleeve.
Literally, and we talked about him last week, and on the desk with Ernie Johnson in NCAA tournament, America and Israel flag. And he said it was not just then, it was even during the whole season.
It's incredible. Yeah. So we were put in touch, and Bruce, Coach Pearl said to me, Daniel, I have this dream. I want to bring my team to Israel.
Love it.
And I hung up the phone with him after a 3-hour discussion, called him back the next day, and said, Coach Pearl, we want to help you make that happen. And so we were involved in financing and helping organizing along with our partners, Complete Sports Management. Lee Miller is a fantastic organizer and one of the most creative people in the tour businesses, and has relationships all throughout college basketball. And the three of us together helped put that and really kicked off college basketball in Israel. We call it trip of a lifetime, but it's a birthright type of trip where they experience everything in Israel and just had a fantastic time, not just playing games there with Israeli competition, but also really getting to experience and understand the country.
When we talk about the Hasbara, I remember I was on the East Coast at that time, and I'm watching Roxy Bernstein and Jay Billis with ESPN Talk about that connection, and how did you convince a major network to say, you're also going to Israel, and you're going to broadcast to the sports world these young, mostly African-American men in an evangelical South playing basketball in Israel against the Israeli national team?
Well, that was part of what we try to do and how we do it. It's not just bringing the players to Israel, because a lot of people will bring a person to Israel and it will change their lives. We're trying to bring a person to Israel and change the minds for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of young people. Our target audience is a 15, 16, and 17-year-old boy or girl that's in high school. And in a year or two or three from now, the first thing they're going to see, the Free Palestine movement or the BDS movement. And we need to at least start that education earlier on. And so our goal is to really find media that really wants to amplify the message. So we reached out to the folks at ESPN through Coach Pearl and through Lee Miller. And they said, we love the idea. Jay Billis came with Roxy Bernstein. They brought an entire crew. They spent an enormous budget on, and a lot of the media areas, they have limited budgets, but they said they wanted to focus on this. They did a fantastic job. All of the games were on ESPN.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And not only were the games on ESPN, so hundreds of thousands and millions of people watched it, but throughout the season, if you followed Auburn basketball or SEC basketball, Jay Billis at every single game would talk about how amazing the Israel experience was, how it brought the team together. You know, when we talk to new teams about coming to Israel, they say, well, why should I go to Israel? So first of all, every 4 years, college basketball teams can do an international tour. So they can go to a place like Barcelona or Amsterdam, or they can go to the Bahamas. And what we talk to them about is bringing a team together. There's no better place, if you really want to explore your roots and explore the history, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Jewish, to bring people together and really understand your roots as Israel is. And people just love that idea.
So Coach Pearl's easy because he's gotten his blood. As we like to say, he's not Coach Pearl, but Mordechai Ben Dover, which he said during the Ukraine crisis and the press conference. He says it everywhere he goes. But Tommy Lloyd, who was at Gonzaga, now at Arizona. How do you, I don't want to say convince, but what is that conversation that says, and then Tommy Lloyd goes on the air and says, this is the best place I've ever been as well. What was the lead up to that he says, I'm going to do it too? So
there's Tommy Lloyd, who's the head coach of the University of Arizona, and there's also Jerome Tang, who's the head coach of Kansas State. So the question is, how do we recruit the teams to come? So first of all, they love the idea that to come to Israel because it is a bucket list place for their players. And often many of the players are religious. They came from religious households. For some of their mothers and grandmothers who attended services every Sundays, going to Israel is a dream come true. And so they are living a dream for their entire families that they can share with their friends, their families, and everyone in their community. So that's a pretty amazing and impactful thing. But there's some coaches who really get it. They understand, they have a worldview. When you talk to Coach Lloyd, who's an amazing man, in fact, he's a big contributor to Athletes for Israel.
Okay, we can be Wildcat fans here. It's okay.
But Coach Lloyd is somebody who, when he was at Gonzaga for many years, he said to me, look, Daniel, when I was in Gonzaga, the only thing that I could sell people is, we couldn't get people to come out to Spokane, Washington. I had to recruit people from all over the world.
Right.
And so he is a world traveler. He loves to travel. He's happy to get on a plane to go to all parts of the world. He'll call me and say, Daniel, I'm in some Eastern European country, both recruiting, and I'm on a vacation with my family for a few days. He loves to travel. He loves to meet new people. He loves understanding different cultures and interaction between different cultures. He's been a huge supporter. If you hear some of the videos that he did about Athletes for Israel, he'll say, Daniel, we had such an amazing time. He said these are some difficult times, but we'll get through it. The first thing he said to me when he got back is, Daniel, please let us be the next. In 4 years from now, we want to go back to. I want to bring my team back to Israel.
Again. Wow.
I got this great story about Coach Tang from Kansas State. So he's also a leader. He's he was a former reverend and became some of these guys are just incredible motivators of young men. And he when he went to Israel, he came back to me a couple months later, and he called me up and I said, Daniel, I decided to start keeping Shabbat.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
So first I fell off my chair, and I lost my phone. I collected myself and I said, Coach, what do you mean you started to keep Shabbat? And so he said to me, Daniel, you talk to me about what Shabbat is and how beautiful it is. And I decided that you told me that you don't use your phone on Shabbat, you don't watch TV on Shabbat, you don't use any electronics on Shabbat. He said to me that one day a week I decided to have an electronics cleanse and just really focus on my family and my friends, and that's what Shabbat is. And I really, I was almost brought to tears, and I said, this is really the meaning of an Or LaGoyim, to be a light unto other nations. To, very often, my mother's a Holocaust survivor. Very often we say to people, like, come to our Holocaust museums and understand what we went through. So maybe you could feel pity for us, maybe you could understand. But for me, like hearing that story and that relate to me, if somebody really understands the beauty of Shabbat, that to me is showing such the positive experience, the current experience of being a Jew that we can share with other people. To me, that was, there's so many little anecdotes to me that I would say, if only this happened, this would be worth the trip. There's so many of those kinds of stories that we have over a course of a week trip.
That's an Or LaGoyim story. Maybe you can find a story that's an Or LaYehudim story, that somebody in Israel sees one of these teams there and is like, well, what are you doing here? And an impact that it has for the Israelis seeing the support of these young basketball players. Yeah,
well, one of the trips, I swore I would never bring a Jewish team to Israel or Jews. People always say to me, Adam Fox is a Jewish hockey player. You got to bring him to Israel. And I always say to them, look, while we as Jews are inspired by what we're doing, the goal, in general, there are many great organizations that focus on Jewish identity. Birthright is a great example of an organization that focuses on being Jewish and why it's important to be Jewish and why it's important to love Israel. The Maccabiah Games, incredible. Our focus is not about Jewish identity. Our focus is about really impacting the hundreds of millions of people that just aren't educated about Israel. We're not looking to fight the BDS movement or Ben & Jerry's. There are plenty of great organizations that do that. There are plenty of organizations that do great things with Jewish identity. Our focus is on combating antisemitism and about being a positive, showing the positive, all the positive things that are about Israel. So but post October 7th, we decided to bring Yeshiva University to Israel.
Coach Elliot Steinmetz also.
Coach Steinmetz,
right here, an amazing guy,
was fantastic. And a close friend of mine called me up and said, Daniel, I know you never thought about, people bug you all the time about bringing a team to Israel, a Jewish team. And I said, that's really just not what we do. But I said, after October 7th, we need to show the world that when Jews are against the ropes, when our Jewish brothers are feeling pain, that we come to their aid. We don't know them at all, but we know they're fellow Jews. And I think that's an important message to send to other college teams and to other people around the world. And it was a tremendous support to people in Israel. We sold out a stadium of thousands of people cheering fans that cheered on the YU Maccabees basketball team. We spent days doing camps and clinics for kids. We visited special needs areas like Shalva. I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Kalman's
a close friend.
Oh my gosh.
We have too many overlapping friends.
I think this is going to go for 3 hours too.
It could. So between all those, it was an amazing, impactful. I had a mother come over to me and said, my son just was never really excited about being Jewish or being connected, and since the trip, every day he's putting on his tefillin, and she came to me in tears and said, I can't thank you enough for what you've done.
Another YU adjacent coach, Mike Sweetney, also a good friend. Sweetney. It was hard to get to know him because Syracuse, Georgetown, but it was actually Israel that brought us together. And I said, if Israel can bring a Hoya and an Orange together, then anything can happen in this world.
That's hard.
And the first time that he came to a synagogue in America was after your trip. He stood right here on this bima, and he explained to this congregation why it was so powerful. And he spent Shabbat with us as well.
Amazing.
So the outcomes of Athletes for Israel actually comes right back here to our own community, where our own kids say, I can do that too.
I love it. I don't know, given that Georgetown and the Hoyas, even the Syracuse and the Hoyas got together, I don't know if a Michigan fan could ever connect with a Buckeyes fan. but we are talking to Ohio State about coming. They are one of the teams that is really excited about coming in our pipeline.
So the website says that it combats anti-Semitism and racism. I'm wondering why you added that word and how bringing these players to Israel, does it combat racism there or is it here?
So I think I think an important component of Athletes for Israel is really connecting with the Black community in America. They are really a front leader in the social discourse of America. And the proof in the pudding is whatever they're wearing today or whatever music they're listening to today, in 2 to 3 or 4 years from now, our kids are going to be wearing in our community. And they're the leaders in that whole area. And we need to find more ways to connect with that community and find alliances with them. And what we talk about is, instead of finding and talking about our differences, let's find our commonalities.
Yes.
And it's something that Coach Pearl always talks about. He's a Jewish coach in the middle of Auburn, Alabama. He's trying to find ways that we can all connect. And it happens to be that, given the 3 major religions are there, let's all find ways that, you can do your religion in one place and we could do our religion in another place. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time in the UAE. I don't know if you've been to Abu Dhabi, but
Not yet. It's on my bucket list.
you have to go. But there's a famous area that the UAE's, obviously, as you know, through the Abraham Accords, has been, they dedicated one area called the Abrahamic Family House that has a synagogue, a church, and a mosque in the same area. And they're all the exact same shape and size, and they're all magnificent and beautiful. And the more I looked at it and saw it, I said, this needs to be something like this in Jerusalem, because it was so beautiful and so impactful.
Actually, it's an NYU professor, David Hollander, who wrote a book just a couple of years ago called How Basketball Can Save the World. And he also came here, and he talked about how James Naismith, obviously the founder of basketball, originally was a preacher and a minister, but the sanctuary became the court.
Wow.
And so obviously in the Abrahamic Accords, the sanctuaries become the sanctuaries, but for what you're doing and what I'm sort of dabbling in is our courts become our sanctuaries. We're meeting people that we would not meet in any other way and for any other reason.
It's so true. And, one of the things that we believe in is just, my father was very involved in the civil rights movement. And many Jews, the synagogue I go to, the Jewish Center, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan was one of the original rabbis. And he, there's pictures of him at our synagogue sitting next to Dr. Martin Luther King. And we were very involved and connected. But unfortunately, it's been 75 years since our communities have had a real relationship. And we need to build strong relationships with that community. And it just happens to be that our communities are more focused on themselves. We need to be outreaching to that community to make sure that we can
sports
can
is
connect.
that tool.
And sports is the way to do it. And one of the ways we need to do that is educate our own kids to start having those conversations, right? If we all know the famous Harry Truman story of why he ratified his business partner and one of his closest friends, convinced him to take a meeting with Chaim Weitzman. And one of the reasons why he was in favor of the state of Israel.
And so just to bring up something that happened to the Jewish community, now it's almost 2 years ago, but Kyrie Irving. It affected this school as well. In fact, there was our flag football team that had a coach that said Kanye and Kyrie were right. It was during those times that I had the opportunity to connect with Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson, who said they needed to talk about a rabbi about antisemitism. And what I shared was what you just said, that can we find our commonalities and not our differences. Athletes for Israel, how does that spot fill a void that maybe Kyrie didn't have in his life, that maybe one day he might go to Jerusalem too?
Yeah, I think that's our goal. Our goal is to find, our Jewish athletes that can connect with some of those folks, that can build those relationships, so that maybe one day when he has a question about Israel or about the Jewish people, he'll call his friend. There's a famous story about Bill Walton, who's an L.A. guy,
That's the memory, yep.
So Bill Walton's, one of his best friends is a guy by the name of Tal Brody.
Yep.
Tal Brody is a precious gem and one of the most famous Israeli basketball players. He would have been a top 10 or 15 pick in the NBA. But the president of Israel called him up and said, do you want to play for the NBA or do you want to play in Israel? And
On the map.
On the map, exactly. We've all seen that incredible movie, On the Map. And Tal Brody was Bill Walton's roommate. And the way Tal tells the story is that Bill Walton didn't want to play basketball. He was crying every day in his freshman year. He was homesick. And Tal would say to him every day, don't worry, you're going to make it. You're a good player. And Bill Walton in his later years, the first person he would call when anything happened in his life of anything, of any monumental importance, would call Tal Brody. They were super, super tight and super close friends. And it's great and Bill was a huge supporter of Israel, as we know.
Post October 7th, obviously none of us could have imagined what happened, but have the goals changed? Or, I mean, last year I was in Israel, as I just said before, the week that Arizona came. It was heaven on earth there. My children were in the Golan, they were in the Kinneret. We were everywhere, and we were watching these young men and women go to Israel. What does that look like now? Has there been hesitancy from any college teams? Have there been more teams saying, I'm ready? What does that look like?
So post October 7th, I think one of the most impactful things that happened was the president of the University of Arizona, his name is Dr. Bobby Robbins, who spent a week with us in Israel and then in the UAE. He sent the most pro-Israel, anti-Hamas letter out there. Very impactful letter that reached millions of people. Dr. Robbins is a former heart surgeon. He was the CEO of the largest hospital center, well-known Stanford cardiologist, trained at Stanford. I took him to save a child's heart. When we went directly into surgery, the first family that he saw was a family from the Ivory Coast, an African family. Second family he saw was, people from all different diverse races, religions. And after he went into the surgery, was beyond impressed. They conferred with him, and he couldn't believe the level of surgeries that they were doing there. After we debriefed, and we were in full garb, we saw the open heart surgery on an 11-year-old boy. They said to him, "Do you know where the boy's from?" And he said, "I have no idea where the boy's from." And they said, "The boy's from Gaza."
This was after October 7th?
This is, no, this
was
right before.
Right before. August, yeah.
And this is in August when we were there. And it was just the two of us. We went to the open heart surgery. And his mouth dropped. He couldn't believe it. And they told him that when they bring him back to Gaza, first of all, he was brought in by Israelis. They're not allowed to talk about where the child had surgery, who was surgery. They couldn't tell that a Jew or an Israeli performed the surgery on the child. And that was so impacted him, that story so impacted him that he said after October 7th, he wanted to have an impact. He wanted to say something strongly in support of Israel. So that's in answer to what happened October 7th. In terms of the trips, Israel's in a war right now.
Right.
So we can't bring a major college program. However, many college programs are interested and they want to go back. And I think most of the college programs are of the view that, hey, every 10 to 20 years, there's some kerfuffle and some non-peaceful times in Israel, but when that quiets down, they do want to go back. So we have several colleges, university programs that want to go back next year or the following year. We're hopeful that the war ends quickly. We still do have professional players that have been going over the course of the summer.
It's a little bit about Eddie muted. Curry, and just yesterday an article on E-Jewish Philanthropy about what Tamir's doing, and in connection with you guys, and Eddie Curry. I thought it was fascinating with Eddie because it wasn't just that he went to Israel, but he himself was affected by gun violence, that his child was killed. And he's like, well, I was dealing with bullets, but these people are dealing with missiles. So what was Eddie's inspiration to go? I think he had been before as well, correct?
We had brought him the first time, and he said he wanted to go again. We brought him this time as well. Eddie's just been a huge fan. And he loves Israel, and he loves the Jewish people, and he sees the impact, and I think he sees what's right and wrong. And so he was excited to adopt one of the hostages, which has gotten great global attention in global media, which is great. We also have a coaches trip that we were planning for the end of August. There's also a couple of baseball trips. Kevin Youkilis is planning to go. We have a couple of Dominican players that are planning to go. So it's a little bit more muted. And the other thing we did is we went to over 24 college campuses across the country.
Beautiful.
To spend time with the Jewish community, but also bringing the sports teams together with the Jewish community. So we would pack packages to help displaced families in most of those trips. But we went to everywhere from Michigan State, Indiana, Arizona, Kansas State, Kansas, Arizona State, all over the New York areas, all over the Maryland areas, some Florida schools, Tulane. So just really to give strength to the Jewish community, but also to bring them together with the sports communities, or often, the kids that most people look up to on campuses.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, growing up in Syracuse, Derek Coleman, Stevie Thompson, Billy Owens, I can name them all. I was just back East Coast, and in the garage, I still have hundreds of programs that I tell my parents, no, you will not throw those away. Those are my Torahs.
Love it.
And those are the experiences that allowed me to say it's never sports or faith, but it was always sports and faith. I think it's really important for the Jewish community to understand that, right? Oh, I have to miss religious school, I have to miss day school. But no, you can actually do both. In fact, the K-State coach can do Shabbat as well.
Exactly.
As a YU grad, as a observant Jew, is there a verse of Torah or a teaching that sort of guides you in this world of sports that you use as inspiration?
You know, I'm not a verse of the Bible kind of guy. You know,
Only Coach Pearl.
Coach Pearl. You know, the beauty of Coach Pearl is, I would say, he's not observant at all. He would admit it. But his ability to quote text is incredible and amazing, and his ability to really understand, you know, to really go into, you know, he goes to Bible classes regularly, and I'd say, I've always had a passion for sports and wanted to connect my love of sports with my love of Israel together, and this is sort of the reason, my foundational reasoning for doing this.
And so, just take us 3 to 5 years out. Obviously, there's trips, there's different things like that. If you could dream and tell us all how we can help with Athletes for Israel to make it even, not even better, because it's amazing as what it is, but what you envision what it can be.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, first of all, we brought about 150 participants to Israel last summer. There is a tremendous, believe it or not, there's more demand to go to Israel than there is supply of both tickets and airlines and funding to do that. Eventually, we'd like to bring over 1,000 people to Israel. But secondly, and a new initiative that we're focusing on is what we call AFI Teens, which is we need to mobilize. Again, we're trying to reach not 15 million. I say to my team every day, if we just reach 15 million Jews, we will have failed. And a lot of the news that we get on are, all the Jewish, after last summer, after the incredible trip in August with Arizona and Kansas State, we were literally in every single Jewish print article.
Right.
I said, well, we haven't been successful until we get into the Tucson newspapers and into the Auburn, Alabama papers, and Manhattan, not New York, Manhattan, Kansas, which is where Kansas State is. That's when we know we've succeeded, because those are the target audiences that we need to reach. And so we need to mobilize. We started an initiative called AFI Teens, where the goal is to bring thousands of Jewish sports-focused teenagers who have their families love their Judaism, but they are so focused on their sports lives that it's very hard for them to connect their Judaism because sports, as you know, is
all-encompassing.
It's all-encompassing. And for any of you, I've spent a lot of time with collegiate athletes. We kind of joke about their ability to actually take classes, but when you see
full-time job,
when you see what they do, it's a full-time job. They've got two practices every day for 2-3 hours. They have film sessions. They have workout rooms. They've got, just relaxing in their bodies after going through such difficult training. It's really, really rigorous. So I don't even know how they have time for any classes. But if we can train those thousands of Jewish teens to become ambassadors, and to be able to have the skills to articulate about their Judaism, about their love of Israel to their friendly players. So, for example, right after October 7th, I was out at Kansas State and met with all the players. We sat in a media room, and they said, Daniel, tell us about how we should talk about October 7th.
Right.
The first question, I talked to them, I said, here's some of the bullet points that I might use, and you should make it your own. But, the first question that somebody said to me was, we see these free Palestines everywhere. How do I think about that? How do I look at that? And so, not everybody's versed in being able to respond to that. And if we can enable our high school teenagers to talk about that and have real conversations about that and educate and realize that not everything is black and white. There's a lot of gray in this issue, and there are a lot of rights and wrongs on both sides. And if we can help our students to be able to be advocates, that's an important thing. So we're taking these high school students through a 10 to 12-week training program.
Oh, that's amazing.
Connecting them through sports and through education about Israel and their Judaism, and enabling them to be ambassadors.
Well, sign us up. We are very excited to be part of this journey. I know it's been from afar, but we're excited to be directly involved going forward as well. We are so excited to have Dr. Daniel Posner, founder and chairman of Athletes for Israel, who's done amazing work before October 7th and now leading to the future, connecting Jews, connecting people around the world with sports, with Israel and their identity. It's great to have you, Daniel, on Rabbi on the Sidelines, and we look forward to partnership ahead.
Thank you for having me. It's been
Have a
great to
day.
be here.